Vaccine mandates, Afghanistan, and border issues? We got a lot to talk about today. I'm Nico Fideli.
And I'm Brittany Fideli.
And this is For the Republic.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome back to For the Republic. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. Please be sure to like the episode and share it with all your friends. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Click on the bell icon to be notified when a new episode drops every Sunday night at 7 p.m. We have a lot to talk about today. What do we have up first?
So the first thing that we have to talk about is actually the vaccine mandate that Governor Andrew Cuomo, or former Governor Andrew Cuomo, put in place before he was ousted as governor. And it basically requires all healthcare workers that work at state-run facilities to be vaccinated by, I believe, September 24th. I think is the deadline for the vaccinations. Otherwise, they have to be either fired or resign from their position.
Right. Yeah. So this is circulated in the news recently because a U.S. judge has blocked the New York mandate for healthcare workers. So a judge out of Utica, this is courtesy of Reuters, a judge out of Utica, New York, in a written order said that he was blocking the mandate from taking effect because it didn't allow exemptions based on workers' religious beliefs. So he deemed that this was unconstitutional because there was really no exemptions for religious beliefs. So a lot of confusion when this first reported. It was first reported that he just blocked it because it was unconstitutional.
Right.
But then it came out that it was because of religious beliefs. So Governor Hochul has until, I believe, September 22nd in order to respond.
Yes.
I don't know what her response is going to be.
I think she's already so far. She came out Wednesday, I believe, and don't quote me on that because that could have been like Tuesday. But she came out and she said that she doesn't think that the religious exemption really has a leg to stand on, and she doesn't see this going anywhere. So
yeah, so we want to unpack
her response.
Yeah, we want to unpack this a little bit. We want to talk about the constitutionality of this. The OSHA, what's OSHA's authority on this, coming from the top down, and what's the morality issue on this? Is there room for a religious exemption? So first things first, I want to talk about, is this really unconstitutional? And the first thing that comes to mind, and this is coming from Interactive Constitution. You can look up, there's a lot of cool things on there. You can look up like old court cases and stuff like that. But back in 1905, there was actually something that went up to the Supreme Court, and that was a vaccine mandate in Massachusetts was brought to the Supreme Court, and there was a vaccine mandate against smallpox. And this is Jacobson versus Massachusetts, and it was voted a 7-2 majority that it was constitutional to have a smallpox vaccine. But the thing to keep in mind is that smallpox is very different from COVID, don't you think?
Right, just a little bit. I think, percentage of survival wise and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just doing quick research, if you have late term smallpox and like it didn't get taken care of, then you are basically dead. Like 9 out of 10 people die from smallpox. Right. So that's it's almost completely opposite, even more so, where you have a 99% survival rate for COVID.
Right.
So this doesn't really deem as a public health emergency like smallpox per se was.
Right.
So that's why like the constitutionality is a little bit sketchy, a little bit gray in this area. So, and also like this stuff has been coming down by executive order, like where like smallpox, for example, was voted. So like it went through the proper channels. It went through the legislative branch of Massachusetts. It wasn't just executive order like our governors and our federal government have been doing. So that's kind of like my take on the constitutionality of it. What do you think?
Right. I agree. I think that there's really no constitutional support for these executive orders to
Mm-hmm.
force people to vaccinate. I don't think that in any case really with something like this that it should be up to one person to decide whether that person is the president or the governor or
Mm-hmm.
anything else. That should be a decision that is going through the court system to see the legalities and the constitutionality of it. Even if it has to go up to the Supreme Court, which right now we have a Supreme Court that's very heavy on honoring the Constitution. So I think that they'll be very careful to pay attention to what actually the Constitution says and how these things can or can't be enforced according to that. So I think
Yeah.
that it's really important to go through the proper channels. I think for a couple of reasons, so that you don't have a dictatorship type behavior out of your government, but also so that people feel more comfortable knowing that there is a legality or there is a backing behind what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Do you think that this most recent mandate from President Biden is going to reach the Supreme Court, or do you think it won't make it that far?
It's interesting. I guess it depends on the judges that it goes before because, you
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of liberal judges right now in the court system. A lot of them favor on behalf of things like this, of
Mm-hmm.
things like mandates
Right.
and these
Yeah.
these more extreme rulings, these more extreme executive orders, things like that. So I think that we'll have to see. I do think probably it will end up before the Supreme Court. I'm not sure it's going to get struck down before that. And I think even if it does get struck down, I think somewhere they're just going to keep elevating and elevating and elevating until it does
Yeah.
get to the Supreme Court, which I do think personally, I mean, my opinion is that I don't think the Supreme Court will uphold it. I don't think there's enough backing behind this mandate.
I hope you're right.
Yeah. So, but it is interesting to note that the mandate in New York for healthcare workers is actually different than the mandate that Joe Biden
Mm-hmm.
put forth because Joe Biden's mandate is actually for the private sector. He did put
Right.
forth a federal mandate as well that all federal employees, with the exception of the postal service,
Yeah.
wink wink, have to be vaccinated. But the mandate for the private sector that's going through OSHA, whereas the mandates that Andrew Cuomo and now Governor Hochul are backing. Those are actually slightly different. So those are not going to go through OSHA. Those are actually just flat out
Right.
mandates
Yeah.
where the state is going to terminate employees who refuse to submit.
Yeah. So you mentioned OSHA, and I wanna show this to you guys. This is called the General Duty Clause, and this is what OSHA actually has the authority to do. And so this is the General Duty Clause, and it says each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. So the reason why I bring this up is because does OSHA really have the authority to enforce a vaccine mandate for COVID? I mean, I don't see in any way, shape, or form that COVID is likely to cause death or serious harm.
Right. I mean, I think what the government is going to try to say is that if you have an outbreak of COVID-19, it could cause serious harm to, a
Hmm.
workplace. So you could have like a bunch of people get mass infected and it could cause serious harm. I don't think though that this really has a leg to stand on. I think that right now COVID still has too high of a survival rate. There's still a lot of options out there. A lot of people who don't even realize they have it because they have very minor cases of it. And right now you're looking at pretty much 80% or very close to that of the country is already vaccinated. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be really hard for them to prove that COVID-19 could cause, serious harm in the workplace or potentially death in the workplace. And I think OSHA really doesn't want to enforce this. I think
Right.
they're
Yeah.
already understaffed. They already don't have the resources available to do what they need to do. And I think, we know that firsthand coming from working in a plant, actually, that OSHA really doesn't have a lot going on. So it's going to be very difficult, I think, for them to enforce this in a widespread way, and
Yeah.
especially like there's a lot of places that you don't think OSHA is going to be visiting very often that now they're going to be responsible to go in and see like any place over 100 employees in the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, and like just the few jobs that I've had, like I've been on both sides where I've been in a work environment where OSHA was like heavily regulating, and I've been in a job where OSHA was basically non-existent. So like, I mean, yeah, it's funny because working at a place where everything has to be OSHA regulated, and then working at a place that doesn't, like you pick up on little things like ladders and where it's supposed to be like fire extinguishers are not up to date and stuff like that. You like pay attention to that kind of stuff. So like, I mean, there's plenty of places that aren't really enforcing OSHA rules to begin with. So.
And typically when they are enforced, they're usually enforced by like an internal person. There's usually like a safety person or somebody who would like go and inspect those or audit things versus actually OSHA themselves and inspecting or whatnot. Typically the employer is going to provide somebody who monitors all of that stuff to prevent OSHA from coming in. OSHA is really kind of like if an employee turns you in type thing. I mean, sometimes they'll show up for these random inspections, but it's more so if you get turned in for safety violations, which is why most workplaces prevent that by having somebody in charge of that.
So I feel like the only way that OSHA can make this work, because they don't have the manpower.
Right.
The only way that OSHA can make this work is if every employer that has over 100 employees has at least one dedicated employee to make sure that everybody's vaccinated.
Right. And then like if they don't, I mean, like it would take somebody turning them in more than likely. Yeah. Can you imagine like every single private sector place that has more than 100 employees? I mean, that's a massive amount of places. Even just like
a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, not even like corporations. We're talking like there's just a lot of businesses that have more than 100 employees. So yeah, I think it would really take employees just turning in workplace after workplace. And then how long does it take for OSHA to get through that list of places that are being turned in? What do they prioritize one over the other? And then really how does this affect their ability to monitor other safety hazards in the workplace, things that are really killing more people than what COVID would? So I think that's important. If you're working in a really dangerous construction area, you're more likely to die from falling off a ladder or falling off a roof or something like that if you're not following safety standards versus dying from getting COVID, contracting COVID on the workplace because you're not following safety standards. So I think it's a little bit different, and we're going to see, I'm interested to see if OSHA kind of pushes back on this or if OSHA has any sort of representation when this goes to court. It'll be interesting really to see how they respond coming forward. They've expressed their displeasure, but it'll be interesting to see how they actually respond to this. Yeah,
that's another question that I would have is like if or when this goes to the Supreme Court, who's going to be like represented? Is it going to be so and so against the federal government, or is it going to be so and so against OSHA? That's all stuff that remains to be seen. I guess it depends what OSHA does, or will OSHA have a court case against the federal government saying that we can't really enforce this? So that things to be looking forward to coming down the pike here. But yeah, so the morality issue of this, the religious issue of the vaccine in general. I want to show you guys this pamphlet that comes from Immunize Nevada. They have this little pamphlet here that talks about vaccines and fetal cell line history. So I guess the main hubbub is how much is fetal cell lines used in these vaccines. And I want to draw you to this paragraph here. It says, are Pfizer and the Moderna COVID-19 vaccines developed using fetal cell lines? So typically in drug research, they'll use fetal cell lines from aborted fetuses. Typically, like the two in this case is a kidney cell that was isolated from a terminated fetus in 1972, and another retinal cell line that was isolated from a terminated fetus in 1985. So they've been using, from just the little research that I've done, they've been using these cells for many, many years, many decades, and it's been replicated and mutated over and over again. So it's basically unrecognizable from the original cell line. But still, you trace it back to an aborted fetus, and there's a moral issue there for those people who are pro-life. And this says, are the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines developed using fetal cell lines? It says the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines produced by Pfizer and Moderna do not require the use of any fetal cell cultures to manufacture the vaccine. Early in the development of mRNA vaccine technology, fetal cells were used to demonstrate how a cell could take up mRNA and produce the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So it seems like the technology that Pfizer and Moderna are using, once we use these fetal cell lines in order to see how it reacts to the spike protein. And the Johnson & Johnson am I in the way of it?
Yeah.
There you go. So on the paragraph to the right here, it's the Johnson & Johnson does require the use of fetal cell cultures, specifically PERC6. Is that one of these? Yeah, that's the retinal cell line. So things to unpack here. What do you think morally? Like, I think that people with religious beliefs and who are pro-life, I think they do have a case. But I want to talk about our opinions. What's your opinion?
So personally, coming from an anti-abortion stance, we believe specifically that all life is precious.
All right.
Of course, these babies were aborted back in the 70s and the 80s. So it leads to the question, can something good come out of that? But really, for me personally, I think that it depends on the case-by-case situation. I think it depends on whether the nurses who are presenting the religious argument actually believe what they're saying. And to me, that integrity behind the intent is important, because are they just saying this to get out of doing the mandate, which, nobody wants to be forced into a vaccination. So it's understandable that they're like clawing at, whatever they possibly can. Or do these people genuinely have a conviction about using technology or using medicine that was developed using aborted fetal cells? So my question really would be, do these individuals use other things that were developed using aborted fetal cells? So that's really the question behind it. If it were not the question of a mandated vaccine, but rather terminal cancer, and the only treatment that they had was developed using aborted fetal cells, would they have the same stance or the same religious objection? And I think that's something that only they can answer personally. I think that's something that only they really can hold themselves to that conviction. And I don't think there's really a way that the government or a judge can do that individually. You have to go through each person and look at their history and so on and so forth. So I do think that if there are people who are genuinely sticking to this because that is their conviction, then yes, they should be able to use that. That should be their exemption from using this. However, if they're just using it as a way to get out of the vaccine mandate, then I do think morally that's an issue. I think morally that's deceptive, and it doesn't really stick true to the religious ground, so to speak, because really, if you're not holding to your integrity, then what religious grounds do you have? So I think it's really case by case, but I don't think that there's a judge out there who can look at that individually. I think the judge is going to have to rule as a whole, and I think that they do have a case. So to me, this should be upheld. There should be religious exemption, because there are people who genuinely are convicted in this way who should have the right to object.
Yeah, and I know, like, like some Mormons and some Jehovah Witness, like, they don't do anything. Like, so like even going to take the fetal cell line out of it, they don't put anything in their body, because they think that medicine is, I mean, I don't want to speak for them because we don't believe what they believe, but from what I understand.
Right. There definitely are some religious groups that don't use any kind of vaccinations or anything, because they don't believe in the science or the medicine behind it, or believe in the way that it was developed. Right. So what do you think as far as like the moral grounds here, and do you think that there can be good that comes from using aborted fetal cell?
Yeah, so I actually battled with this very issue. I thought about using religious grounds in order to get out of a vaccine mandate, and then I really thought about it. I said, like, what do I really believe? And also the question that I posed to myself is, if this was actually a public health emergency, if like I had a chance of dying from COVID, would I think the same way? And I was kind of to admit, I was kind of on the fence of using it as a way to get out of a mandate, not really to use it as religious, as a religious grounds as far as like
Morally.
being morally, yeah. So then I really thought about it, and and like I think I've come to the understanding that yes, like the act of aborting was wrong, but there are many times in history where God took something that was evil and made it for his good. And I think like this is one of those examples where, yes, the act of aborting was wrong, but we were able to use it to improve something. We were able to use it to make a groundbreaking advancement in science. And I think that that's the good of humanity coming out with something that was evil. So it's not like abortion was illegal and they said, oh, we have to abort a baby in order to make this vaccine. So like that to me is a moral issue. But they're using something that already happened and will say, well, we might as well make good of this. So like that's how I feel about this as a moral issue. And I know that not everybody's going to agree with me. It's like, oh, you're using aborted fetus, like it's wrong. So I respect that.
Right.
But I've come to the conviction that, like, yes, the act was evil, but that doesn't mean that we can't use it for good. So does that make sense? Is that yeah. So that's kind of my take on it. But also, we have to talk about the effectiveness of the vaccine. Right. Because that's another thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's another issue. And we've had a couple things come out this week. For instance, I think the biggest one that really took the beginning of the week, took the attention at the beginning of the week was that it came out that the Pfizer vaccine after 9 months is actually only 40 or 42%.
42% effective.
Yeah, effective against the Delta variant, which is one of the big things that they were saying. Actually, I think this came out last week. But this was one of the things that they were saying coming from the White House. You need to get vaccinated to prevent yourself from getting the Delta variant. And really, the Delta variant it's only effective 42% with the Pfizer vaccine. And then Moderna came out, I believe Tuesday this week. They came out with some results on a Moderna study stating that within 9 months of receiving your first vaccination, you actually double your chance of receiving a breakthrough infection. So up to this point, they've been saying that it's the White House really has been saying that the unvaccinated are getting the vaccinated sick because the vaccinated have protected themselves. It's the irony of the whole statement. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But what they're saying is that the vaccinated have protected themselves, but the unvaccinated are getting the vaccinated sick. When in reality, it's now kind of more apparent that as time goes on, the vaccines become less and less effective. So Moderna, by month 9, you double your chance of getting a breakthrough infection versus people who are just being vaccinated. Yeah. So I think that that's important to note. And it's important to note that there is a lot of research coming out suggesting that the reason that we're seeing these mutated viruses is because these vaccines are actually not suitable enough to actually take care of the infection. Right. And so it's causing the infections to mutate into something bigger. So the problem that we're seeing is that there's just a lot of information coming out that suggests that the vaccines are not as effective as they want you to believe, and that over time you obviously are even more at risk, and then further are you helping to mutate the virus by getting vaccinated. Yeah. They also say like natural immunity is like 14 times more effective or something.
Yeah. Every study has, and you guys, I encourage you guys to do the research yourself. Right. We don't have sources for that, but just the research that we've been doing, and you'll see other people talk about how natural immunity is not being talked about. Right. Natural immunity by every study over the course of history of viruses have always been more effective than a vaccine. And that doesn't mean that vaccines are bad or counterproductive, because I do think that vaccines can be productive and have been productive. We have smallpox, polio, things like that. Like I'm all for those. But there's something about natural immunity, especially with a virus that is. And I can't believe this is controversial. It is not deadly. The COVID is not deadly for a healthy individual. Right. So I definitely think that natural immunity is important
I would say as deadly, because obviously we have had young, healthy people that
Yeah,
have
yes.
passed away from that, but we've also had young, healthy people that pass away from a lot of other things that young, healthy people aren't as severe risk of being of dying from. So, I think we have to point out that really with any medical issue, whether or not you're in the high risk group or not, there's always a chance of dying. But yes, with a survival rate as high as the coronavirus has right now, it begs the question of whether or not these vaccines are actually effective, and whether or not you have a greater immunity by allowing your body to work naturally.
Yeah. So let's talk about this study. The Mayo Clinic actually came out with a study. This is courtesy of MedRxiv. This talks about the preprint, the abstract of the study. We'll just go through this real quick. It talks about clinical trials and real-world studies have affirmed the effectiveness and safety of the FDA-authorized COVID-19 vaccines. So this Mayo Clinic health system studied over time from January to July of 2021, during which either the Alpha or the Delta variant were highly prevalent. And they talk about the effectiveness of Moderna, Pfizer. I don't know if Johnson & Johnson's on here. I don't think Johnson & Johnson's on. I think they just did Moderna and Pfizer. So it's a little bit confusing because they kind of use like codes in order to if you could follow me here, they kind of use codes. So like Moderna is the mRNA-1273 and the Pfizer is the BNT162b2. So if we come down here where it says both vaccines were highly effective during the study period against SARS-CoV-2 infection, mRNA-1273, so that's Moderna, was 86% effective. BNT162b2, that's the Pfizer, 76% effective. And this COVID-19 associated hospitalizations. So against hospitalizations, Moderna 91.6% effective. Pfizer BNT162b2 85% effective. So that was in January. So good numbers there. I would say those are great numbers. However, in July, the effectiveness against the infection was considerably lower. And here's the mRNA-1273, which is the Moderna, 76% effective. And then BNT162b2, this is where that 42% effective comes in. So we can see that over time, it seems like that these vaccines don't really do as well as we're being told.
Right, they don't hold up, and that really begs the question of what the necessity of them are.
Right.
And really when you should get it. So if you get it now, you're protected for what, 6 to 9 months, and then what? So they're talking about developing some booster shots. It's a lot because there's different age groups that are becoming eligible for vaccination. Are these booster shots going to be safe for those different age groups? For different different groups of people, such as women who are pregnant or are have given birth recently.
Yeah.
Is it going to be safe? So they've come out and they've said, don't get it if you're pregnant. Now it's safe to get it if you're pregnant. Don't get it if you're young. Now it's safe to get it if you're young. So there's
that's such a good point. Like I feel like this is what I want to stress on is that if you haven't been paying attention, you need to start paying attention, because what did we start with? We started with 14 days to slow the curve.
Yeah, well, they say the hardest part of 14 days to slow the curve is always the first 18 months.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
So we're right in that real hard part.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So hopefully it'll pass.
Yeah, I think so.
But no, if you haven't been paying attention, this is the language that has been occurring throughout this whole pandemic, being pushed by the media and the left, is that, if we just do this, then we can beat COVID.
Right.
If we just do this, we can beat COVID. If we just do this, we can beat COVID. And it's going on and on and on. At first, it was mask and shelter in place for 14 days.
Yep.
Then it was, okay, we got to mask and shelter in place until we can crush the curve. And then it was, okay, if we could just get to the development of these vaccines. And then it was, oh, if we can just get people to take the vaccines.
Right.
When does it stop? The problem is it's never going to stop.
Right, because right now there's just still so little information on that. And that's why there's a lot of people who are holding out. There's a lot of people who are saying, we don't feel comfortable with this. There's a lot of people. And now I'm seeing like crazy things happening in workplaces where they're offering money, they're firing people, they're requiring it. Even just recently, I talked to somebody that I know that their job place actually gave everybody $1 raise, and that's to reward them for putting themselves at risk by staying in the workplace during this pandemic time. And actually, if they don't receive the vaccine by a certain amount of time, they lose that $1 raise.
Wow.
So the only people who keep that $1 raise are the people who get vaccinated. So you're seeing like manipulation of your workforce. You're seeing a lot of stuff like that, rather than just rewarding the workforce because they're staying loyal and they're working and they're doing what they're supposed to do in a time when a lot of people are not working and a lot of people are not staying loyal to their employees. Instead, they're actually using it as a manipulation to force their workforce to get vaccinated. So you're just seeing a lot of craziness happen out there. And I don't think that a lot of people feel comfortable ever acting out or making a step or making a change when there's so much confusion going on. I think it muddles the water. It's hard for people to understand like where the lines are, what's actually true, what's not. And so I think that really is the bottom line. Like, people just don't know. There's too much conflicting information. There's too many people coming out and saying one thing versus another. It's just and credible people. We're not talking about like, just wacko people who come out because they're anti-vaccination. We're talking about credible people who are coming out on both sides of the aisle. And so I think that's why it's so important not to mandate this, to allow people to do the research, to look at what's going on, to see the results of other people being vaccinated, what they've gone through, the effectiveness of it. Do you know, or are you seeing a lot of people who are having breakthrough cases after certain periods of time? I think it's important for people to be able to look into that and do their own research and make up their own minds according to what their health requires.
Yeah, the way that we have been top-down governing for quite some time now, and even Trump was guilty of some of it, is not the American way. Like, we have 50 states with 330 million people in this country. We have all different kinds of ways of life. We have all different kinds of cultures. Just from us traveling recently, how much different is it down south than it is up here? Like,
it's massively different.
I mean, the people live different lives. And so, like, this top-down control isn't going to work with everybody. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what's right or what's wrong. The fact that you're doing it across the board is going to cause some problems.
Absolutely.
So, not to beat this too hard, and we'll move on from COVID in a little bit. I just found this interesting. That there's some businesses that are pushing back from this vaccine mandate. Right. And I wanted to do a little bit of research on it, and come to find out, I'm not usually too much into the conspiracy theories, but just doing a quick Google search, I had trouble finding what businesses are pushing back against the vaccine. And I know there are some. So I want to show you guys a quick comparison here. This is doing a Google search of businesses against vaccine mandate. And the top stories we have are, Biden meets with executives at Disney, Microsoft, Walgreens, and other companies on the mandate. Companies grapple with questions about COVID-19 vaccine mandates. 24 states threaten to sue Biden over vaccine mandate for businesses. So, we got, out of the top stories, we got one story that talks about maybe, people suing Biden over vaccine mandates. We come down to like top links and articles. Talks about challenges from the New York Times, what businesses are saying about the new vaccine mandate. Companies grapple with the questions about it. Some businesses welcome vaccine mandate. Here are some companies mandating vaccines for all or some. Here's who loves Biden's vaccine mandate. I mean, is this what I searched for?
Right.
Companies who will navigate Biden's vaccine mandate. So, like, on and on. Like, not even on the first page, there's not one article that talks about businesses that are actually against it.
Right. I think it's because, Google really knows your heart. And so.
Oh, yeah. So it knows what you want to search for in
right.
your heart.
Right. Yeah. It really knows your heart. So.
What I found interesting is I just used one other search engine. I used DuckDuckGo. I typed in the same thing, businesses against vaccine mandate. And the top 3 articles talk about businesses against the vaccine mandate.
Right.
So like, and like these aren't like articles that are like nobody's ever heard of. Like, I mean, if I click on this first one, Citizens Journal, I mean, this comes from the Daily Caller. I mean, everybody knows what the Daily Caller is. Like, this isn't something that like is deep in the dark web or something. And then we have another one from the Western Journal talking about business groups push back against the vaccine mandate. So it's just very interesting. I found that very interesting that it seems that I think there's an agenda being pushed, and the private sector is helping push that agenda, don't you think?
Right, I do. And so I think that's why when you're doing your vaccine research, you should probably not use Google. It seems like there's a lot of corporations that are now working with the federal government, that are now working with the local governments, and they are controlling the information that you're seeing regularly, or the information that is easily presented to you. And we know that because Jen Psaki confirmed that during one of the briefings at the White House, that they actually work with Facebook now to let Facebook know what is fake news and what is not fake news. So just like the total reach into journalism coming from the government, coming from local and federal government, is absolutely insane. So yeah, I definitely think that affects what you're seeing. And I think not just with COVID, but we're seeing that even with Afghanistan, correct? Yep. So right after the suicide bombings, the federal government sent in a drone to supposedly take care of the ISIS-K leaders or group who had carried out the act of the suicide bombing, or had initiated the act. Obviously, they're not the ones who carried out the suicide bombing, but so this U.S. drone strike happened right around that time, which was weeks ago now, and the White House has been continually pressed on the issue. Who did the drone strike actually get? And the White House has been consistent in saying that they're not releasing names, but they were able to get the target that they were going after.
Yeah.
So that's what they've been consistently saying. We got who we were going after.
Yeah.
But that's come out to be untrue this week. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Pentagon just this weekend has just confirmed that the drone strike did kill 10 civilians. Courtesy of the Daily Wire reporting this. U.S. killed 10 civilians, including 7 children, in a failed strike on alleged ISIS target. So this to me is all about timing, I think. So on August 29th, when the drone strike took place, there was reports then that were talking about, it was, of course, speculation, wasn't confirmed because the White House wasn't saying anything. They were just saying, oh, well, we got our target.
Right.
But people were reporting then. I think even the New York Times, I mean, let me know if I'm wrong, but I think like New York Times, Washington Post, they were saying
questions back then.
There were questions back then. They were saying that we believe that civilians were killed in this drone strike.
Right, and I think that's what's led to the continual questioning in the White House of Jen Psaki, because she's been questioned about this several times. Who did this actually get? Who did you actually get? Who did you actually get? And and they've just had that consistent message. We got who we wanted to get, which is another blatant lie from the White House. They knew they didn't get who they wanted to, but they didn't want to release the information that they had actually screwed up, that they killed a humanitarian aid worker and they killed 7 children and 2 other adult civilians. They didn't want to release that information, so they blatantly have been lying from the White House until the Pentagon actually came out and confirmed that what everybody thought was true actually is true.
Yeah, and it's very interesting how this all progressed. Do you think that the reason for holding off that information and then doing the vaccine mandates and then just kind of releasing a statement about it later, I mean, the timing of it kind of seems a little sketch, don't you think?
Right. I think, honestly, I think this particular White House administration has used COVID to distract from a lot of things that are going on. So I think every time that there's been something serious that they've been accused of or that they have done wrong, they've come out with some sort of big news on COVID-19. And I think you see them using COVID-19 and the scare tactics of the last year that they have used that to cover up what's going on and to hide their faults and their mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. So the U.S. failed here. They didn't get their target. They lied. They said they got their target. But
the government lied.
Yeah, the government lied. Said they got their target. But there is good news. The French have done it for us.
Yeah.
So,
good old France coming in to save the day again.
Yep. Also, courtesy of the Daily Wire, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, has announced on Wednesday that French forces have killed an ISIS leader in Africa who was responsible for killing several U.S. troops and several French charity workers. So, I mean, I'm glad for this win for France, but it also kind of like breaks my heart, and it kind of sucks, and it kind of makes me question, the strength of the U.S. government saying that we don't have the resources, we can't carry on certain things, we don't have the manpower, we don't have the technology, whatever the excuses of the day.
Right.
And France was just able to do it. Like,
right.
France of all countries. I mean, yes, they used to be a powerhouse, but as of the last 150 years, they have been not really a force to be reckoned with.
And you've seen them actually battle a lot internally with terrorism due to immigration into the country. So they've really had a lot going on in that country for the last few years, certainly more so than we have on homeland, obviously. So I think that it's interesting to note that they just went in there and took care of this, something that, in my opinion, the U.S. government could have easily done. And then they screwed it up, and then they lied about it, and then they actually, instead of making it right, like they didn't even pursue it and try to make it right. They were like, oh, we screwed up, and we'll just fake it till we have to let everybody know. We'll pretend that we did the right thing until everybody finds out. So it's just a crazy turn of events, and something that you're not hearing a lot about. I mean, because really, obviously, because we follow conservative news outlets, it's something that we've heard about, but I have not seen this really on a major headline of a left-leaning media outlet. And I'm sure that's not to say that they haven't reported on it, but it's to say that it's not being plastered all over the news, and that's concerning. It's concerning that the media isn't just tearing the Biden administration apart over lie after lie after lie after lie. Instead, they're doing a lot of sweeping things under the rug, a lot of covering up, which is really crazy. It's crazy to me, especially because the Biden administration really is the greatest threat to mainstream media, because they are censoring so much of what's coming out. So I think that's really concerning that the media is so far in the federal government's pocket.
Right. Yeah. It's sad because like what else is going on that we don't know about, that the media have a job, and they're obviously not doing that job, and instead they are using their resources as a pundit to make the federal government look better than it is.
Right.
So what else do we not know? Like what bombshells would the media otherwise, if they were doing their job, release? So I mean, it's very concerning coming from this administration that's supposed to be the most moral administration ever in American history. So they say, that they claim that.
For most moral, they've been going after Texas a lot lately because of the new Texas heartbeat laws and the fact that Texas is fighting against abortion, which is great. It's awesome for Texas, but they also now are fighting against illegal immigration because Biden has basically opened the borders, and now you've got Greg Abbott coming out and just saying, you know what, I'm the governor, and we're tired of allowing so many illegal immigrants over the border, and we're going to do something about this. So what does he come out with?
So another article courtesy of the Daily Wire, Greg Abbott claims that the Biden administration has flip-flopped on border strategy. So the border has just been a mess, absolutely a mess. And Governor Greg Abbott is just kind of taking matters into his own hands, and it's sad that he has to use state funding in order to protect his borders. I mean, that's like the one job that the federal government should have, is protect our borders, right, from foreign entities.
Something the previous administration was very, very
adamant about. Yes, for sure. So, according to this article, supposedly Biden did reach out to the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, and told him to lock down his borders. But then flip-flopped and said 6 hours later that, no, you shouldn't do that.
He probably forgot the initial phone call, I'm guessing.
He probably did. He honestly probably did.
It was like probably in his journal, like call Governor Greg Abbott, and he couldn't remember if he had done it already. And then so he called him a second time and just like got confused, So who actually knows,
Who knows?
Or maybe he got confused the first time. We don't know because, the White House has either been confused or lied about pretty much everything since this administration has taken place.
and we're not exaggerating here, as we'll point out, because Governor Abbott has shut down at least 6 points of entry across the Texas-Mexico border, and this is what it looks like. So here we have a drone image of what it looks like an underpass on the Texas-Mexico border. Here's another screenshot, and we just see there's thousands. I can't remember exactly how much, but I think I want to say like 6,000 to 10,000. I think they were saying. So
right, and crazy enough, in an effort to hide the seriousness of what's going on, the Biden administration actually came out and banned drones from flying over the area and getting footage of this. Yeah. So that came out Friday. That drones are no longer allowed to come through and get footage of this mess that's occurring at the border right now.
Yeah, we can see that there's just thousands of people lining up here at the border. And what I want to point out here is look how many Border Patrol agents there are compared to the amount of, like, that to me is crazy. Like this still image paints it perfectly. There, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 border agents on that screen.
Right.
And there's thousands upon thousands of people, and they're not being held back by really anything. Just
a wire fence.
Just a wire fence. Like that, to me, that's a scary situation for these guys. Right. And it really shows that we are not on top of this border issue.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, how can you be on top of a border issue when the Biden administration basically opened borders and said, come on in? So, that's, I don't think you can really, you can't really fix a leaky sink if you don't actually patch it. You know what I mean? Like if you open up your pipes and then turn on the water, it's going to leak. So it's something that you really have to look at the administration, look at what they've actually done, what they've actually said, what they're actually encouraging. And then, now they say, well, go ahead, now lock down your borders. Oh, don't lock down your borders. Like this crazy mess that's going on with illegal immigration, crazy mess of people coming over who are unvetted, who are unvaccinated, people who are human trafficking children into the area. I mean, we've had reports of people coming to pick up child migrants from, different facilities and taking 20 or 30 kids at a time, and then the government has no idea where those children are now. So I mean, there's just huge concerns over what's going on, and there's a lot of people who say, well, we should open up the borders because it'll be a better place for these people to live. But is it a better place for them to live if these 20 and 30 children are being picked up by strangers and then being human trafficked into sex slavery and other things? So it's an absolute crazy mess that's going on, and these people think they're coming here for a better life, and some of them may get a better life, but that is not going to be the case for a large portion of them. They are not going to have better lives being human trafficked. They're not going to have better lives being sold into sex slavery. They're not going to have better lives in that aspect being separated from their families, and not because, Trump is putting them in cages, but simply because the border cannot handle what's going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. And it shows that, the strategy of the Biden administration has always been, to further your analogy about the sink, where if there's leaky pipes, they'll just put on a new faucet and be like, hey, look how nice this looks.
Right, look at how nice the faucet is. Right.
So, I mean, this is another one of those examples, and one of their ways to kind of silence, like you said, is that they're not allowing drone footage in these locations. Like, is it really a safety issue to have like a drone flying around? Yeah. No, I think it's to kind of silence and to shut down what it actually is going on. So, right. I mean, that's important to point out. So,
a lot of silencing going on lately. And what do we have on For the Entertainment this week?
Yeah, this week on For the Entertainment, we have some good and some bad, unfortunately. So there's a video game publisher called Tripwire, and just recently their CEO got ousted, was forced to resign over a tweet. And this is what that tweet said. John Gibson says, proud of U.S. Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat. As an entertainer, I don't get political often, yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of this issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer. So, I don't think there's really much controversy here.
Right.
I think he's just making his opinion known, not really, I guess, coming against the other side, but just making a statement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, affirming Texas law, affirming the banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting to note that really having an opinion in 2021 is wrong unless your opinion goes with what you have been told the masses believe, which is not even necessarily the case. It's just what you've been told the masses believe. So it's really bad to have an opinion right now. If you have an opinion, you probably shouldn't speak it. I feel like we're going back to the days of Aaron Burr or something, like, the less that you speak and the less controversial you are, the better. And really, what kind of craziness is that we're teaching people not to take a stance, that we're teaching people not to take a moral ground, one way or the other. So I think this is such a negative thing, and I think it's a negative thing coming from either side. I never ever support shutting down people's opinions, because everybody has the right to their opinion and their belief, and it's great to be able to sit down and discuss those and talk about. I think we talked about this some during our little bonus episode about why we're conservative.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important for people to be able to discuss both sides of the fence, because extremes of either side can be very dangerous. Extremes of either the left or the right can be very dangerous.
This discussion of abortion, there's always been two sides to it.
Right.
There's and like it doesn't matter what side is right or wrong. I mean, I would not want this guy to lose his job if he was pro-choice and he said, "Oh, I'm against the heartbeat law. It's
right.
It's against women's rights and everything like that." If he tweeted that out, guaranteed he still has a job.
Right.
But
100%.
because he mentioned pro-life, he didn't even say anything controversial, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
He just said that he's glad that the Texas law was upheld,
and the Supreme Court did its job.
The Supreme Court did its job. Mm-hmm. He didn't say that, if you're pro-choice, you're a murderer. Or he didn't call out a group of people. To me, this was not anything controversial. He was just making his opinion and going on the record on his personal account. He didn't say in the name of Tripwire. He didn't say anything like that.
Tripwire isn't mentioned at all in this. Right. It's not listed at all in the tweet or anywhere with his information in the tweet. Nothing like that. So if you just looked at this tweet, not knowing who he was, you'd have no association with the company at all.
Yeah.
So quite crazy that's happening, and we're seeing it more and more. We're especially seeing it. I mean, we saw a lot of controversy, not with abortion, but we saw some controversy this week with Rose McGowan, with Nicki Minaj. A lot of them coming out and saying something that is considered not part of the mainstream opinion, and so they've been just been attacked by fans. They've been attacked by media. They've been called dangerous, so there's just a lot of this kind of stuff coming out where if you have an opinion that is alternative to the far left, then you're most likely going to face backlash. And now we're seeing that you're facing backlash in the workplace. Crazy. Yeah. Absolutely insane.
It's very sad. And to me, I know we've seen this, it seems like hundreds of times by now, but this one in particular was just so crazy to me just because of the way he worded it so well, I think, and made it so that it wasn't controversial,
right?
And just made his opinion known that he's pro-life.
Right.
I mean, that's crazy. That someone says, "Oh, I'm pro-life." Yep, you're done.
You're terminated.
You're terminated.
Right.
That to me is very dangerous. Very dangerous.
It is very dangerous. Almost I think as dangerous as the Steelers playing the Raiders this week.
Oh right? Yeah, very dangerous.
So dangerous for the Raiders.
Oh, right. Dangerous for the Raiders. Yeah. So we have 2 new games this week for our teams. You were actually really close last week for the score for the Broncos game. So congratulations, kudos to you.
Yeah, I was the winner.
Well, we both won. We both predicted correctly.
I was closer.
So you were a little bit closer. But the Steelers did have a win against the Bills, and the Broncos did have a win last week. So I'm really excited that we're both 1-0.
The Broncos are playing the Jaguars this week, correct?
Yep.
Are they in Florida or are they at home?
Yeah, they're at Jacksonville.
Okay.
So It's another away game, but I'm pretty confident.
I think you should be. I think obviously probably the biggest the biggest threat to your team is going to be the acclimation.
Yeah.
I would think going from those mountains all the way down to Florida, that's quite a jump in the weather, in the heat, in the
I think
the air.
We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
So I think that's probably your biggest threat. But I think you guys looked really good last week. I was really impressed with your quarterback.
Teddy Bridgewater looked awesome last week. I was
he did
so happy.
a lot of like really scrambly plays, and he just like pulled out some just really good moves in the midst of pressure. So that was interesting to see, something we didn't really see out of Drew Lock last year.
Yeah. Yep. And so I think that we'll have an okay time, and I think that you guys will have an okay time against the Raiders because you guys are home this week.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you guys are gonna do very well. I mean, the Raiders did not look good at home last week.
They did not. They had a rough week last week.
Yeah, I think that, and I think it was more coaching issues. It seemed like the players were fine. I mean, they put up 30 points or whatever.
Yeah, but wasn't there some crazy debacle in at the end during overtime? They really almost lost the game with some silly stuff.
Yeah, being at the 1 yard line in overtime, I think that you should be able to, if you can't run it in 4 times with 4 tries, then you don't deserve to win.
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't run it in and they still won. So I think it was more of a coaching issue, maybe getting off week 1 jitters or whatever. So I don't think the Steelers should sleep on the Raiders.
No, absolutely not.
But I think that they'll be okay and they'll win handily at home. I'm gonna say 28-14.
28-14. I'm gonna say for Broncos, I would love to see maybe. I'm thinking. Let's go with 20. So let's go with 20 Broncos, 3 Jags.
Okay.
So I'm thinking
Okay.
a couple touchdowns, a couple field goals, and then I think maybe the Jags might put up a field goal.
Nice. All right. So our defense is gonna hold them to 3 points. I like that.
Yeah. So
I really
23.
like that. All right. I was gonna say you were kind of lowballing us on the score, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with 20-3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. The Jags. I think that the Jags have a really great chance to win against the 2020 Steelers team, but other than that, they're they're looking a little rough. So, but yeah. So we're excited for the games this week. Excited for football in general, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, your team has won this week, and
unless it's the Raiders or the Jags.
Yeah, unless it's the Raiders or the Jags. But enjoy this weekend. Enjoy football, and we'll see you next time, guys.